Hi, and welcome to CryptoBiography. I'm your host, Brandon Starr, and this is the audio version of episode 73, which is going to go up to YouTube, and then I will take the audio, clean it up a bit, and put it out as a podcast available on iTunes and Stitcher and so on. And if you have any comments or questions about this episode or previous episodes, cryptobiography@gmail.com, or hit us up on Twitter or Facebook. And this is going to be Connections Part 5. So last week we had a scary story for Halloween, and before that it was, of course, Connections Part 4, and we're on Part 5 now. Back at home, Connor met up with Alma. She had made dinner, a simple salad that she always somehow made delicious and refused to divulge the secret to. It was something she added to the vinaigrette. They ate mostly in silence until Alma finally asked, "Do you have Wolf pinned down?" Connor nodded. Even though I've told him, even though I've stopped his getaway, he still thinks he has an edge. He will escape for a while. I do hope we can find one early enough to save. Me too, Connor mused. We got lucky meeting each other. Me more than you, says you, Connor retorted, grinning. Boy, that was the old way of finding our type, wasn't it? Alma shrugged. Not much choice. Usually one or two life switches and wealth is found. So, look among the wealthy elite. Then look for someone who feels a bit out of place, not quite themselves. Connor nodded. Of course, the ones who have done it too many times become easy in anyone's skin. Then that tell goes away. I hadn't perfected it yet when we met. No, and I hadn't either, quite. You were so handsome then. And I'm not now? This is actually my favorite. But I was attracted to you the moment I saw you. I had no idea you were like me. No, and I had no idea about you either. Not that night. Alma paused. Wolf had 5 full jumps then, correct? Connor nodded. And an unknown number of temporary jumps. Alma twisted her mouth a little, thinking. Without having someone else to see what it was like, do you think he really understood everything about what we are? Connor thought for just a moment. No, absolutely not. He thinks he knows, but he doesn't understand it, not really. I mean, look at his choices. All of his full jumps are essentially into people just like him. We aren't that different. Besides, every society has more powerful groups. That's why we look for our kind among the wealthy and powerful. That also means mostly male, and in the West, white. Is that true? Or have we mostly been choosing what we're used to? After all, our first bodies were both white anyway. Point taken. Still, it leaves little reason to change. Connor nodded. He was quiet for a few moments, then asked, Do you now think we are human? That question again? Haven't we rehashed this long enough? Connor shrugged. What is human if it isn't a person in a human body, one mind? So what are we? Were we always what we are, or did we change from human to this when we first jumped? Darling, I don't know. I know I love you. Connor nodded. Alma looked at him a long time. I know how important that question is to you. I've long since become comfortable with the idea that you and I are, in fact, not human, but something outside. But you never have. Connor nodded again. He seemed to be in pain. It's a little early, Alma continued, but I have a gift for you. Connor, who had let his gaze drop to his empty plate, looked back up at her. I've had a project going within the United States government, she said. I started it a long time ago and slowly nudged it into place. It's now going full steam. Connor looked almost shocked. And what is this project, to find more of our kind? Alma shrugged. That and more. I've been wondering if we are the only alternative to humans out there. It turns out my hunch was correct. There are other alternatives to humans. Such as? I'd say we're very fortunate overall. Our difference allows us to jump our way into a kind of immortality. Others aren't so lucky. People who have lost their physical integrity, who have made others sick by their very presence. Others who are immortal but by living forever without aging. All rare, all happen. There are likely others, harder to detect. And what is your reason for doing all this? Alma smiled, a little tired smile. I wanted to know what you want to know. If we are human, if there are others like us, and if there are others not like us, but not like other humans either. You astound me. Thank you. I can't wait to learn what you've learned. Alma pushed back her chair. One moment, I'll get my computer. She came back with the laptop and opened it up. May I read some to you? She asked. Of course, Connor said with a grin. Alma opened a file. Jonathan Bloom, interview. Subject is a 41-year-old Caucasian male living in Omaha, Nebraska. Divorced, no kids, junior high school teacher, mathematics, homeowner with above-average debt load, no criminal history, nothing unusual medically before the events. Transcript. It happened for the first time about a year ago. The tip of my left forefinger went numb. Then, after about a day of that, it turned white. I was on the point of going to the doctor about it when it fell off. Just like that, just fell right off. I went to the doctor and they couldn't tell me anything. But slowly, like a lizard's tail, my forefinger started to grow back. It looked like a new version of my old forefinger. Soon, other parts of me started to get numb and fall off. I went to doctors, but they couldn't tell me what was going on. The worst was when my leg went. That really scared me. It's one thing to lose a finger or toe. It was something else to completely lose my left leg. Later, my right. But that first leg was insane. Took weeks and weeks to grow back. What scares me is that my ear went numb this morning. If I lose an ear, how long until I lose my nose? Could I lose my whole head? How could I even possibly survive it? Alma stopped. I wonder if this is some strange variation on what we have, because, of course, we can survive outside our own heads, in a sense. Perhaps Mr. Bloom can, too. And it notes here that the parts that grow back look younger, much younger, like a young adult or even a teenager's body parts. Perhaps this is his way of finding immortality. If so, then I presume that he will at some point lose his head, and it will come back young and healthy. And who knows, perhaps the last step will be his whole body sloughing off and regrowing back. Connor looked thoughtful. And how many of these kinds of stories are there? How credible are they? There are dozens, Alma replied. And their credibility varies, of course. But a lot of them I find highly credible. And that's the end of the story for this week. So, this story ties together a lot of the previous CryptoBiography episodes. Hope you enjoyed it. I'm probably going to set connections aside for a little bit and work on some other short stories for a bit, and then come back. Probably come back to it because this feels like a good sort of stopping point. We've sort of tied things together. We know what's happened with Wolf for the most part. We've learned a lot about Connor and Alma, what they can do and what they can't do, and how it's happened, and so on, and a little bit about their history. And it feels like a good point to kind of move aside, work on some other things, and perhaps come back to them at a later point. I've been enjoying this whole process. I didn't necessarily, like week one, like when I did the first story of, someone losing their physical integrity, I didn't necessarily have the idea that it would connect with a bunch of other stories I'd be doing later. But once I did a few stories and I realized I was sort of subconsciously doing them all as sort of modern day, sort of strange, not exactly superhero, but, sort of odd, sort of vaguely fantasy, vaguely sci-fi-ish, sort of body changes, body horror, body, whatever, sometimes even superhero type stuff. I thought it might be interesting to find a way to tie them together, and that's what this has been sort of leading up to. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you do, let us know. CryptoBiography@gmail.com. Hit us up on Twitter or Facebook. We always appreciate shares on social media, reviews on iTunes, all that good stuff. So CryptoBiography will be back next week, same time. Sunday around noon is when I start recording, and then I put it out as a YouTube video, and then I clean up the audio, put it out as a podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.